Hi, welcome to Luvafoodie LinkedIn Live. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. We are so happy to be here today, and I have a very special guest who's going to share her story about her heart disease, her brain aneurysm, and it's also very important to me because I'm a heart survivor and a heart attack survivor. And as many of you know, not only is it February, but it's National Heart Month. And Cindy and I both were involved with the American Heart Association at the same time. We just didn't know each other. So somehow we found each other on LinkedIn about a month ago and have become friends. And I'm very pleased to welcome Cindy Sorensen.
Thanks, Michelle. This is awesome to be here. It's a heck of a way. I always say it's a heck of a way to become an advocate for something and to share based on the health journey we've been on. But
yes,
I always say it's if I can tell the story and help somebody, then it's worth it in an odd way.
Yes, and so Cindy, tell us. Let's go back 5 years ago because that's when it started for you. And Cindy also she may interject and tell us a little bit about her husband's story too, because it's sort of unique that both Cindy and her husband, Mark, ended up with heart disease and some very serious situations in a scenario that most people would never encounter in their entire life.
That's right. It is a unique story. And I like to call us the Scarecrow and the Tin Man because we got the brain and the heart thing going. Let's see, this is 2022. So 2016, and I'll just do a brief with Mark and we can come back and talk because his story is really complicated. But we thought in January of 2016, he was sick. He had a cold, but this cold just wouldn't go away. And he was starting to have trouble breathing and he went into, several doctors and let me back up a second. What I really want to get across in telling our two stories is about advocating for yourself on a health journey and also just being aware of changes to your body. And as I tell these two stories, you'll see why this is so important to me is Mark went to several doctors. He went to, urgent care and such, and nobody was on to the fact of the symptoms that he was presenting, that it was heart disease. Nobody asked the question at all. We were long distance runners, marathons, half marathons, not overweight. We're not smokers, no high blood pressure, any of the things that would high cholesterol, any of the things that would be typical risk factors. And so they weren't even asking the questions. And in March of that year, finally, a nurse at his place where he works, where they have a clinic there, sent him for a CAT scan or as an MRI, and he was in sudden onset end stage heart failure. So we can come back to his story, but the important part of the beginning of it is that he had to keep advocating for himself and going different places and getting questions and asking questions and getting answers and it I don't know how much time we lost in those 3 months and how much damage was done, but it was a tough road. And about a year and a half later, he ultimately ended up with a heart transplant. A lot of complications with the heart transplant. He was gone for about 3 months. He was in a coma, medically induced coma. He went off to rehab after that. We got him home, and literally about 2.5 weeks later, I was in Spain for a wedding with my son. Obviously, Mark couldn't go with me. We happened to be in an elevator, and the father of the bride was standing right next to me. And I noticed it up in the corner of my eye where he was standing. I couldn't see his head. And I didn't think much about it, really. But I was cognizant of it while we were there in Spain, that I had this blind spot. When I got home, I went to my ophthalmologist. Thank God I have just wonderful care because she did the right tests. She said, you don't have a vision issue because this blind spot that you have in your eye, you actually have it in both eyes. And what that tells me is that this is a brain issue, not a vision issue. And she told me, I think you've had a stroke.
Really?
And, yeah. And I'm like, okay, wouldn't I know if I'd had a stroke? I think I would know that. But of course, as I've come to learn, since then, that the loss of vision was, if you've had vision changes, that is a symptom. So when I talk about being really aware of small changes in your body, I mean, I could have gone who knows how much longer and never noticed that I had this blind spot. But noticing it and realizing like, hey, that's not normal for me. I went to the doctor, and, after it was all over, of course, I had so much anxiety thinking, what if I hadn't gone to the eye doctor? What if she hadn't done the right tests? And what if? But thankfully I had good care. I noticed that change, and I went to the doctor and I had good care after that. But yeah, an MRI at Regions Hospital, they knew something. They couldn't see quite what it was. Then they did a CAT scan. They still couldn't see. This is of my brain, and they could see something lighting up, is what they called it, but they couldn't tell what it was. So I was admitted to neurocritical care ICU. And in the morning, they did an angiogram of my brain. And then I just, I kind of remember coming to, and a couple of my friends were there because, of course, Mark, he's home, just barely out of the hospital and rehab. He can't drive yet. He can't be in hospitals because he can't be exposed to germs. And so a couple of my friends were there, and they're like, does she know? I don't know. Does she know? Has anybody told her? I'm like, what? I'm here. I'm in the room. What? And I was told I had this rare type of brain aneurysm in a really rare location, and I was going to need brain surgery. So yeah. And then in the course of that, of course, they've got me in the hospital. So they're testing me for everything. Like, what could this be caused by? Because they were all shocked. I mean, the neurologist in the ER said, okay, this is not what we thought this was going to, because I'm not the walking symptom. I'm not overweight. I'm not a smoker, all these things. And I said, well, what did you think it was going to be? He said, well, we thought maybe you'd have some twisted blood vessels. We could take care of those. But you're just not the classic.
You look classic. And Cindy, that's what happened to me. I mean, I was misdiagnosed for 10 months because I didn't look like I had, even though my whole family, my dad's side of the family, all had heart disease. My bad doctor at the time should have ordered an angiogram with contrast, which he didn't. He said I had costochondritis, and I had chest pains, I had shortness of the breath. I thought, but after 10 months, I went back and I said, I'm dying. Something is wrong with me. And so I really like how you began the show with saying you have to be your own advocate.
Yeah.
Because we know when something's wrong. And I think as women, being part of AHA, is that we're so often misdiagnosed.
Yeah.
And so continue, but I totally agree with you.
It's with brain aneurysms as well. And I've gotten involved with American Heart Association. Mark and I have been to DC and advocating on the Hill with American Heart. Also, Brain Aneurysm Foundation. I was due to go to DC in 2020 with them, and then everything got shut down because of COVID. So we've been doing it virtually, but advocating for what's called Ellie's Law. And Ellie is this young 14-year-old girl who had terrible headaches, and her parents took her to the ER, and the doctor said, hey, your insurance company won't pay for a scan, most likely. And she's a 14-year-old girl. It's probably hormones. Older women come in, they tell us it's stress and hormones, and they send us home. And poor little Ellie went home, and a couple days later, her aneurysm ruptured and she died. Half the people will die when their aneurysm ruptures. That's just the statistics. So I think about, here's these parents, they had their child in the ER, and there was a medical professional who refused to do a scan for a young girl presenting with possible brain aneurysm symptoms. So and the Brain Aneurysm Foundation collects those stories, really advocating scan. And the hashtag is scan, the number 2, scan to save. Do the scan, get the scan. There'd be a lot of people alive today. So advocating for yourself, but also being aware of those changes. And I just often think, what if I'd had some floaters in my eyes a couple months earlier. That happens when you get a little older. And the ophthalmologist had told me they never really, you'll get used to them. Your brain fills in that vision, but technically there's blind spots from those. So when I first noticed the blind spot, that's what I thought it was. So again, thank God I went in and just had really good care. And the next time I saw my ophthalmologist, she'd been gone for a few months having her first baby, and saw her about 6 months later, and she walked in. We cried together. She's she saved my life. I'm like, I don't think you thought that when you went into ophthalmology, you'd be saving people's lives, but you saved my life. And yeah, so so I had surgery a couple days later, and my surgery is a little more complicated than most because I didn't have a typical type of aneurysm. I got to be that 1% of everything that happens. And typically they'll pop out of the side of an artery, and they'll call it a berry. Just looks like a berry that pops out the side of an artery. They'll fill it in with coils, or they'll clip it. But in my case, the artery was destroyed. The walls of the artery had filled with blood. And so filling the artery with coils, I would have lost more, no blood could go through there, and I would have lost more eyesight. I would have lost my lower vision, which is necessary for walking and running and those types of things. So what the cerebral vascular neurosurgeon, what he did was, they go through the groin, just like they would on an angiogram. They go through the groin up to the brain. God bless the people that figured that out. So I often think, how did that discussion go? Okay, I just want to try something on you. We're going to go from your groin up to your brain.
So did you go home when you went to the doctor and they did these tests? Did they send you home, or did they say not going anywhere? You got to make some phone calls and you're staying?
Oh yeah, no, they threw me into neurocritical care ICU like immediately, and I was on 24-hour watch, because what they think probably happened is they think that I was very close to a rupture.
Wow.
And what I was told was, had it ruptured, it would have been life-altering for me and my family. And most likely it had bled a little bit, and sent a clot out, and it was on the occipital lobe. It was it's called a dissected fusiform aneurysm on the posterior cerebral artery on the occipital lobe. So there's the vision part of it. And so, that I had this stroke from the clot. And so they were watching me, because I was hooked up to, IVs and all this stuff, that in case it did rupture while I was there. So they went through the groin, and then they filled that artery with coils. They look like tiny little springs almost, and they filled that artery with that. Of course, that blocked the blood flow. So then I had to have a bypass, which meant a craniotomy. So going into the back of my head and clipping the artery, going around the aneurysm and reconnecting it to maintain the blood flow. And my surgery was scheduled around the availability of the surgeon, because there's like one guy in town that has done these, and mine was only the 5th or 6th one that he's done. So yeah, it's just not a common thing. So, but again, I had just really good care. I have sunlight coming in through these blinds, so it's giving me a weird, so I was, but this is when I found out that I had blessings come in strange packages sometimes, right? So I find out I have a heart defect because I'm in the hospital. They're testing me for everything to see if there's some kind of a link. And I remember the neurologist walking in and saying, "So now do you know you have a heart defect, right?" Because I was that was 27. So I was 59 years old. And I said, I'm not aware of a heart defect. Remember, I'm running marathons. I'm running a marathon essentially every Saturday. That was just my training distance. And I'm like, no, I didn't know I had a heart defect. So I have what's called
This is before the brain surgery. Find out that you have a heart defect.
Yes, I'm in the hospital. They've put me in the hospital. We're going to have, it's decided what they're going to do to me. But they're doing all these other tests to just, pre-op kind of physical. And then, do I have high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes? They did HIV and Hep C tests. They're just checking everything.
Right.
And he said it to me as if like he was quite sure that I would know that I had this defect. And I said, I didn't know. So it's a bicuspid aortic valve. We should have tricuspid aortic valve, meaning if you take a cross section of the aorta, you would see like three, it would look kind of like a Mercedes-Benz logo when you think about, you know, the three. And I actually only have two flaps. One is like 2/3 what it, you know, it's like two of the thirds together, and then one that's normal size. And then that causes me to have a leaky aortic valve, just mild leakage. And but having a bicuspid aortic valve can also potentially lead to aortic aneurysm forming in that area. And I do have a mild I have a dilation there, a small dilation that they're watching. So every year now I go for an echo, and, you know, they check out if this area is growing at all. If it should grow to concern, just like a brain aneurysm that you might know about ahead of time, then they would do surgery. Most likely,
surgery entail? What would they do if they were to do surgery?
Yeah, so most likely, this is what my mom had. They do run in families, and I told my mom, well, so I told the surgeon, I said, my mom had heart surgery in her 70s. I knew her whole life that she always went for echocardiograms. I knew she had a heart murmur that she always talked about, but there was never any conversation that this was something that, you know, that she had anything that, like us kids, I've got two brothers, that we should be concerned about. But the surgery that she had in her 70s was to repair an aortic aneurysm before it would rupture, because that isn't, you're not going to survive that one. Very few, you know, chances of surviving that. And then to replace her leaky valve. So what I found out in the hospital is those types of things, you know, when I told them what her surgery was, they said, yeah, that's most likely she had the bicuspid valve. The sad part of this story, and Michelle, I don't think I told you this story, is...
No, this is all new to me.
Yeah, is I couldn't ask my mom, because my mom at that moment was in the hospital. She was 86 years old, and she'd been failing. She'd moved from her assisted living to the nursing home to the hospital. And I usually don't tell this part of the story, but this is why I don't know if that's exactly what she had, is my mom passed away the night before my brain surgery.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was just bad.
Know that? Did they tell you?
Oh yeah, I knew that. My brothers were with her, and, you know, she lived in Wisconsin, and I had been to see her early October when they didn't think she was going to survive. And in her case, it was just, it had nothing to do with her heart. It was just failing, you know, 86 years old and just failing. And, you know, as is common with older people, she had urinary tract infection. Oftentimes that will kill an older person because they can't fight it off. They get on top of it, and then it hits them again. And ultimately that's what got her. But we thought we were going to lose her in early October. And so I had a chance, before I ever knew about my aneurysm, I had a chance to travel, you know, the 2.5 hours to go see her. But then once I was hospitalized, they weren't letting me out of there. And really, I was afraid to go too. I was afraid of a rupture. So
that's a lot to go in surgery with on your plate, knowing that your mom had just died, your husband's sick, he's home by himself, recovering, or maybe with some family, maybe your children. But that's a lot to go in, because your spirit and your mind frame and your whole emotions do affect, I think, our health. And knowing that you're going to have brain surgery, number one, is daunting. And then knowing all this other information, that had to have been overwhelming.
It was, I mean, there was peace in that. I had seen her in early October, and we had a great conversation, and my brothers were there. She has 6 grandsons. They were all there. We were able to plan her funeral. We told some funny stories. She had kind of rallied a little bit, and she's planning her funeral. She's not going to wear. I just don't have anything good to wear right now, she said. Mom, it's so funny. Oh, so, you know, I had peace with that. I do feel badly that I wasn't with her in her final hours, you know, but she would understand, you know, she would understand. And my brother would put the phone on speakerphone in her room, but, you know, she was non-responsive. So who knows what she could hear. And I didn't want to tell her I had a brain aneurysm. I just said, Mom, I can't be there because I have a health issue of my own. because I didn't want her to hear I had a brain aneurysm on her final hours on Earth. That is not what she needed to know. So, because you don't know what they can hear, and
right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
So,
but what's that?
No. So, Cindy, fast forward 5 years today. How are you doing?
Yeah, I want to tell just real quick on coming out of the hospital. The one thing that they told me is because the bicuspid aortic valve and the brain aneurysms run in families. So they said your brothers need to get checked, and the grandkids, I mean, like, so all my nephews, they need, and my kids, of course, need to get checked. So my brothers, everything's fine. My nephews, everything's fine. My younger, I have 2 boys, 23 and 26 now. My 23-year-old has the bicuspid aortic valve also. And he has a little worse leakage than I do, but no symptoms from it. The cardiologist said most likely he'll have some sort of work done some point in his life. But that's what I say, blessings come in unusual packages sometimes. Had I not had a brain aneurysm, we'd not know anything about my son having a bicuspid aortic valve. And these are the types of stories, you hear about a young person running down the basketball court and then just dropping right. Dead, sadly, because they've maybe had an aneurysm that burst or some other heart issue that was undetected. And now we know, and he has an annual cardiologist appointment and an annual echo. So now we know. And I think most moms would say, sign me up for a hole in my head if that means I learned something about my child's health that I didn't know.
Right. And so do they think, and I know, so is the correlation between what happened in your brain related to your heart issue, and is there preventive things knowing that your 23-year-old son has this heart condition? Is he worried about getting an aneurysm?
Is he worried about that? So both my sons had brain, they'd had the MRI, well, they call it an MRA when it's the brain, I guess. And so they've both had that and they're fine. They don't have anything. So it might be something every 5 years or so to have a scan, just to make sure nothing is developing. I mean, it took mine 59 years to develop, so it's something they want to keep an eye on. There is, as I was saying before, early research that's indicating perhaps these are formed at the same time. So, as more research comes out around that, and of course the heart defect, the bicuspid heart, only 1% of the population has the bicuspid valve. Wow. So it's like, okay, again, I told you I'm the person that is
very special.
Yes, I'm so special.
You're very special.
But yeah, as far as, I was out of work for 4 months on disability. I mean, you got a brain surgery is, the weird thing about brain surgery, and I've had a few surgeries in my life, C-section and things. And, the brain surgery doesn't hurt. It's very strange. It does not hurt. You don't have pain receptors or something, or nerves or what, I don't know what it is in the brain, but I mean, it was tender where the skin, I had 25 staples back there. So, that was tender, but as far as like, a headache or something, no, it's a different kind of thing to know. And everybody goes through it differently. I know on the support groups that I'm a part of on Facebook, people talk about, how tired they are and everything. I didn't have any of that. And then as far as prevention going forward, there's really not anything I can do. They sent me off to a neurologist just as, this is standard follow-up. We want you to go see this neurologist, and any monitoring that'll need to be done, she'll do this. She'll be responsible for that. So I went to see her and she's like, yeah, so we're done here, because typically somebody that would have an aneurysm has high blood pressure, they might be overweight, perhaps they're smoking, the cholesterol's an issue, all of these factors. And I didn't have any of them. I like I've always said, if this was going to happen to me anyway, I passed up on way too many desserts over the years. So, I was doing everything right. And she said, there's really no reason for us to continue seeing each other. So, but certainly somebody who does have the risk factors, just really, as you've heard me repeat them now a couple of different times, but first of all, first and foremost, if you are smoking, stop. I know it's not easy, and I have never smoked, so it's easier for, for me to say it than somebody else, but than to do it. But smoking is the worst thing for vascular health, and vascular health being, your brain and your heart all connected. It is just the worst. And if you have high blood pressure, if you have cholesterol, I mean, these are things that you can manage either through exercise and diet, or medications, diet. I'm sorry. And then, and weight and stuff. I mean, if you have these things that are going to put you at a higher risk for something like that happening, then take control, because I'm one of the lucky ones, because it didn't rupture. I didn't have any long-term cognitive issues. I mean, maybe I've got some small, some short-term memory stuff, but I'm 63 now. It could be because of that. So can never remember where I parked the car. So anyway, but I am one of the lucky ones in that I know when I was on the neuro recovery floor after surgery and nurses would come in and talk to me, I was the only patient on the floor, because I felt like I was kind of keeping them from, we'd get into a long conversation or something. I'm like, oh, you should go back to work. And they'd say, it's really nice to talk to you because you're the only patient on this floor who can talk.
Oh.
Yeah. So because there were stroke patients and aneurysm patients and such. So I just often think, like, I just feel like I have a responsibility, because I survived this, because Mark survived what he survived, that we tell our story.
Yep.
We tell the story of advocating for yourself. We tell the story of being aware of those changes in your body. And we tell the story of science. We really believe in science, because, and the work that, the Heart Association or the Brain Aneurysm Foundation does for research and product development. And when I talked before about awareness, it's awareness not just for the general population, but it's awareness for the medical profession as well. I told you the stories, for brain aneurysms, but the same thing happens with heart failure as well. You experienced it as a woman, it's not. So it's, when a medical professional is sending you out the door, when you have all of the classic symptoms and they're sending you home, no. So the awareness and education is just as important for the medical profession as it is for the general population.
Right. So Cindy, so I'm curious, because when I was diagnosed and then I had the stent put in and I had the heart attack, I had already started Luvafoodie, and I thought, well, I can get in. What am I going to do? I was fairly young to be diagnosed with heart disease. And so I decided to get involved with American Heart. I came out with a selfie line of spices, and I really wanted to share my story and also help people. And that's kind of what Luvafoodie's morphed into, a clean eating brand. And I talk about heart disease when I'm in the stores, and I share my story as often as I can.
Yeah. My
question to you is, besides being an advocate, how has your life changed, and what are you doing maybe different, or are you still running? I mean, because life is so precious, and I think when you get a sort of a sneak preview of what it could be like if it was taken away, which you certainly had to go through that, it could happen.
Yeah.
Scenario, and it didn't, thank God. But how do you live today, and have you changed your life at all?
Well, first and foremost, work changed for me. I started to mention a little bit about that before. I was off of work for 4 months for the recovery so I started to talk about just the recovery from surgery. I was not to run during that time period I think they wanted me to wait 4 months as well for the running, because the brain just didn't want it getting jumbled up, I guess, from the running. And I did get back into running a little bit. I ran a race on the 1-year anniversary of the surgery itself. I made a sign for the front and the back of my t-shirt. 1 year ago today, I had brain surgery. I had a lot of fun with that. People just congratulating me and taking pictures with me and such. That was cool. But and so then I this last summer too, I mean, I've just been not the distances I was doing at all. And then, Michelle, I know you know this story, but 3 weeks ago, on this past Saturday, my ex-husband died suddenly of a heart attack, and heart disease ran in his family, and he had a cholesterol issue, but he'd had a heart attack, a mild one, 12 years earlier. So he was, being monitored. He was on medication. But I have these two boys, and I'm it for them now. As my 23-year-old said to me the other day, he goes, "You're my only parent." I mean, they're too young to lose a parent. And
they're young.
I push myself. I've always exercised, and I never do anything halfway. I think I'll run. And, in no time I was running marathons. I can't tell you how many half marathons I've done, official ones. And like I said, I do one every Saturday. And in the last 3 weeks, I do my 10,000 steps every day. A good portion of that is on the treadmill in the morning at this time of year. When it's a little nicer outside, most of that's outside, and I'm probably closer to 20,000. But I got scared, I think, these last three weeks of, I went to my ex-husband's funeral, and I was leaving that night to go to a convention in Miami. And I got on the plane, and I got scared for my kids. Not for me. I got scared thinking nothing can happen to me. And I have a different attitude about the running. As I was doing a little bit on the treadmill too this winter, and I was like, I'm going to continue my walking and be healthy that way, and continue the healthy eating, and enjoying my glass of wine, though, that I'm not giving up. But yeah, so I just I'm like, and I don't have, what's that?
I understand what you're saying. Your children, I don't have children, but your children are everything to you, and they need you. But at the same time, it looks like to me you're living the best life that you can, and always have been pretty healthy. But it is precious when somebody close like that, and they're vulnerable, and they're still young, and they don't have families of their own, and so they're probably leaning on you a little bit more than they have in the past, because they lost their dad.
I saw that especially with my youngest within that first week of being a little more, be careful, Mom, and drive carefully, and just, you're my only parent. I mean, and I thought I don't have anything to prove with the running anymore. I don't need to go out. When I think about out here running this summer and how hot and humid, and it's like, I'm 63. People who are 80, they run. But okay, I know that I have, this slight dilation with the possible aortic aneurysm. They're watching it. It's not like that blows up overnight. They will grow slowly, and it's like a balloon at some point, and you have to fix it. The danger of doing nothing is greater than the danger of the surgery. You were asking what they do to fix that. I mean, it is open heart surgery, and they clip that artery, clip that aneurysm, and then if the valve is leaky enough, then the valve gets replaced. But a lot of that surgery, that's how my mom's was done. But even some of the valve replacement surgery is done so differently today. They're not opening the chest. They're going underneath the rib cage. They're not even necessarily replacing the valves. They're actually repairing the valves. The techniques are changing all the time. So, and my cardiologist doesn't think that I'll need that work at some point in my life, given that the leakage is mild. But it's just a different. I'm going to continue to be healthy. I ran for well over. I had different running times in my life earlier on, but this last stint I did for over 10 years religiously, and it's like.
Yeah, you've done that. You have. Yeah. So maybe take a little bit of break, still be healthy, walk, but maybe, like you said, you don't really have to prove that to yourself. You know what you've done.
Yeah, I pushed the limits. I did the marathons. I did the and I will continue to be active. And I really consider what happened to me, looking back on it, this blessing, because yes, we found out about my son. That's the first and foremost in the blessing, and got involved with this, with advocating with the different associations. And I've been brought in to speak for different companies like Medtronic, for example. And, they love to hear the patient stories, the work that they do day in and day out, and how people benefit from that. So I've enjoyed all of that. And I remember telling my sons when they came to see me at the hospital the night before and the surgery was being explained, what happened. I had a son on either side of me, each holding a hand. And my youngest for sure, he was just shaking. And I said, guys, I'm not afraid. Okay. I'm not afraid of this surgery. I need this surgery. I want this surgery. And thank God there's a surgery that they could do. I mean, I could have been getting some other horrible news, but there was a surgery that could be done because of, all the research work that's been done by, by the medical profession and by the associations that fund a lot of that work. But yeah, then when I went back to work in my previous job, I traveled a lot. I loved the job that I had, but I met with my financial advisor. I had wanted to retire at 62, but I just lost some of the desire for what I was doing and the importance of it. I mean, it was important, and don't get me wrong, but I also sacrificed a lot over the years building the career that I have. And when my financial advisor said, you're going to be fine. So that certainly helped. And I knew that I didn't want to be out of the grocery industry altogether. So I created a LLC, a consulting company.
Yeah, so tell us about that, because I'm excited. I get to meet you in person in about a week. And
yeah.
Tell us about the company you started and a little bit about your involvement with NGA. So switch gears a little bit for all of the people that are following and listening that are in the grocery industry, which I am, and Cindy also is too. I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, enough of all that heavy stuff, right?
Well, of course, I am empowered by any heart story, and I'm so happy that you shared it with our LinkedIn followers and listeners today.
Well, thanks for letting me tell the story. I think a really important part of that story, as I talked about the things up front, but also is that we can go through these experiences, and because of science and research and everything, we're alive. We came through it. And I'm not saying me, I'm talking you and me, and Mark and, many people like us. Mm-hmm. And we're living, somewhat normal lives again. Mark obviously has some issues following his heart surgery and the complications there. And now he needs a kidney transplant. And that's a whole other episode. But, you can come through this stuff. I mean, heart surgery and brain surgery sound pretty scary. It's not anything I would have ever signed up for. I can check it off my bucket list now.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, been there, done that. I hope I don't have to have the heart story that he had, but we survived it. I mean, medical science. That's why I said, thank God there's a surgery.
Science is so fantastic, and fast forward 20 years from now, can you imagine what it's going to be then?
Yeah, I mean that's what the cardiologist told my son Will, is like, by the time that you would need work, he's 23, so you might be 60 or 70 years old. God knows what we'll be doing at that time to repair valves. So I didn't want to quit altogether. I mean, you're moving 200 miles an hour and traveling and working and everything. You just stop altogether. And I've been in the grocery industry since the beginning of my career. So it's about 40 years now. And I had always worked on the vendor side. I was in sales and sales management for Nestle and Minute Maid. I most recently had worked for the Dairy Association. And over the years, I had gotten involved with National Grocers Association as an attendee. I'd go to the show once a year and got really involved with the student programs that they have. They have a group of universities. They're called the Food Industry University Coalition, which is part of the NGA Foundation, which is scholarships and such for students. And every year when I went to the show, these students from these universities had been given a case study at the beginning of the fall semester that they prepared, came to the show in February and competed. They presented their presentations and their case study findings, and they competed against the other schools. And so NGA always looked for judges, volunteer judges. So I always judged that, and I'd be a mentor to students there. That was something else that NGA would ask. And I just always loved it. And I feel a strong passion for bringing young people into our industry, in terms of the bench, I'll call it, for bringing new people into the industry is very different than when I started 40 years ago. And young people have told us they don't think it's a sexy industry. They want to go into, sustainability and e-commerce and analytics and, electronic. I mean, things that sound a little bit more interesting. And we're just not talking their language, because all of those things that they've told us that they want to pursue as a career, we have all of them in the grocery industry. Analytics, you want an analytic career? Oh my God, we got more data, than we know what to do with. And sustainability and package design and innovation and on and on and on. But without this, the entry-level jobs that we had 40 years ago is pretty much, maybe starting in a grocery store. And again, we're not talking their language about what that opportunity is in the grocery store for building a career long-term, or what it is on the vendor side, like I was. And we're not on college campuses recruiting any longer. Again, that entry-level job looks very different than it did years ago. And we had so many of them, just being here in the Minneapolis region 40 years ago, we had 80 people for Nestle that were just in the Dakotas, Iowa, and Minnesota. But with the centralized buying of all of these grocery stores, we used to go into every single grocery store and sell our products, and now it's all centralized. So all those jobs went away. And what did we do to fill those jobs 40 years ago? We went to college campuses. Well, and so we had an opportunity to talk to students and to tell them how great this career was, this industry was as a career. We're not on campus anymore. So, something like National Grocers Association annual show is so perfect with these students. Like, there's over 100 students that'll be in attendance for them to network with us, but also for us as an industry to be putting our best foot forward, because there's competition for these students today, and they have choices where, again, back when I started, we had a really high unemployment rate. It was hard to get a job. And now these students, they have, there's competition for getting those students, and they have a lot of choices. And so NGA is just a great place for our industry to see how smart these students are. I'm telling you, Michelle, you're going to love this judging opportunity, because
I'm excited.
Yeah, you are just not going to believe when you're listening to 20, 21-year-olds, maybe they're juniors and seniors for the most part, who many of them have never worked in a grocery store, and they're up there spouting, about our industry as if, okay, they prepared for it for this presentation. But preparing versus building years of experience, those are two different, very, different things. And so to listen, it's just really impressive how, yes, you're going to see that they're impressive. How do we show them that we're impressive, that this is a great place to build a career? And yeah, the career path may look very different today than what mine was. Mine was very classic from what it was back then. So I'm not as relevant to the students as I might have been at one time, because that path looks so different. But we got to show them this is a great place to work. You want management opportunities? We have management opportunities. We often hear that from the students, but that link is missing. And so that's been a big part of what we've done is, and I say we because I have a business partner and you'll meet her. She'll be in Vegas with me this year. It'll be her first time that she's coming.
What's the name of your company, Cindy?
The grocery group. The grocery group. Yeah.
So who would hire your company? Tell us a little bit, like it's consulting.
Yes. Yeah. Consulting, and I'll call it consulting, but it's about I like to say it's about developing leadership in people, products, and innovation and purpose. So, and the purpose part is huge. Okay. Because I can't tell you how many times we meet with somebody, and when you ask who it would be, could be an association, could be National Grocers Association. I'm working with them on retainer for every year for 3 months around the show with the students.
Okay.
So that's about building the future. It could be a state grocers association. It might be a USDA checkoff association. It may be a retailer. We've done training with retailers because, again, what's interesting is, especially in this environment with COVID, where, everybody's stretched with labor, and even pre-COVID, store management, store employees don't see the forest for the trees. So you talk to a, store manager at a local store, and you have these conversations of like, well, why are people going to dollar stores? Why are people going to, membership stores like Costco? Why do they go to Trader Joe's? Why? I mean, we know on average a consumer goes to 6 different types of channels of distribution to fill their their shopping basket. I get my fruit at Costco, but I get my bread at a bakery.
I do that.
I get my chocolate at Aldi. I get, and our snacks at Aldi. I mean, this is what we do.
Right.
But what's happened in traditional grocery, look who's working traditional grocery, often in management roles. They've been there a long time, and they're not checking out the market. They're not checking out. We always use, let's say you're at a traditional grocer in town. I'll just pick Byerly's. You're running a Byerly's store. Who was your competition? Well, your competition back in the day was Lund's. Of course, now they're together, but your competition was Kowalski's, Cub, Hy-Vee, yeah, kind of, but they're all grocery stores. But that isn't who the competition is only today. It's all these other, 40 years ago when I started, there wasn't limited assortment. There was no Aldi. There wasn't a Costco or Sam's, there wasn't Trader Joe's or,
And you know what's coming here, Cindy? Amazon Fresh.
Yeah. So I hadn't even gotten to e-commerce. So then you throw that whole thing, all of that into it. And so I have these conversations with people in stores management who are like, well, why do people go to those stores? Why? Okay. So it's educate with one retailer. It was a big, long conversation about how do we educate your store management and employees of why, where I live, I can go to mall. I got Whole Foods. I can see them all from here. Byerly's, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Costco. They're all right here.
Right.
How does my local Lund's, Byerly's, how do they understand how to keep me in the store and not go to Costco for my fruit, for example, or not do something online, whatever. And it's just amazing how much they're not scanning the external marketplace, because again, they don't see the forest for the trees, and they have enough fires to put out with inside the store.
Right.
So that was one training session we had, was just going through all of the different types of channels of distribution and what the shopper profile is, shopping there, understanding and overall understanding the consumer and what the consumer hot points are, issues of concern, I'll call it, amongst consumers today, whether it's, animal care and sustainability and taste and value and nutrition, all these things, understanding that. So it's really, it's been so great, because my business partner, she worked on, she was with Super Value for a long time, nearly 30. Well, I think she's around 30 years or 40 years in the business as well. So she has, we always say we have kind of that, end to end, from the warehouse side, through the supply side, all the way to the store experience, and bringing it all together. So it's, the history that we have in the industry and how things have morphed to be where they are today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got to be looking forward, but sometimes it is really helpful to understand, kind of like, well, why are we here today? Why aren't young people coming into our industry? What's like, but again, I'm talking to people who are they are the same age of the number of years I have in the industry.
Right.
They're like 40 years old, and they have, I think of one conversation I had with an individual, I think we sat for coffee for 4 hours as I filled him in of, why aren't we on college campuses? Okay. It's like, this is where our feeders, or our feeder was before, was college campus, with all these people, and bringing them into the industry in positions like what I had, which was a sales rep for Nestle. Mm-hmm. I had 65 independent grocery stores, because again, there wasn't the centralized buying. They were in Western Wisconsin and in St. Paul. It was really low risk for Nestle. I had these 65 independent stores, low risk, but it was really high reward for me in the development of my career. It's where I learned.
Territory manager. And then you probably were a regional manager. I went down that whole path too. Yeah. National account manager, Well, Cindy, how can people, I know I kind of try to keep the sweet spot, and we're quite about there, 45 minutes or so into the show. How can people get a hold of you and your company, for example, if they want to hire you? Maybe you can just tell us the best way.
Sure. I have a website, and apologies in advance because the website I haven't updated it recently. But anyway, but all of my boy, that sounds like a common excuse people say, right? Oh, it's unupdated. Anyway, but all my contact information is there. It's thegrocerygroup.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Cindy, and then I have my maiden name in parentheses, Cindy Nichols Sorensen. So I'm on LinkedIn. Certainly reach out to me. I love looking at how do we build the future for this industry, and especially in the development of people. That is really what I love, whether those are people that are currently in the industry, or whether it's like the students that you're going to meet next week at the NGA show. Is this industry has been really good to me. I built a great career here. There were obstacles along the way. I won't tell you, it wasn't always really easy when
I know.
One of, very few women out there 40 years ago, and not very many today either. So there was a lot of, that's another episode too, Michelle.
We'll have that conversation offline.
That's right.
Because I worked in a male-dominated industry too, as the only NAM, National Account Manager, for several of the companies I worked for.
Yeah,
I was the only female.
Yeah, and kind of used to it, but that also is a great opportunity for training. I've done some speaking. Phil Lempert had me speak at his annual Retail Dietitian Business Alliance, all women in the room, and talking about how are you successful. He initially said being successful as a woman in the industry, and I said, I'm not going to talk about that. I'll talk about how do you be successful. So a lot of it is coming in with the right mindset and strategic thinking. And I talk a lot about that. I taught at the U I taught a food sales class at the U right after I had retired, and talked a lot about that to the students, of understanding the difference between strategic thinking and tactical execution. I was like, if you leave this class understanding that, you're going to be ahead of a lot of people sitting in C-suites.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of what we have talked about as well. And I've done some writing for, I had a monthly column. I had 2 monthly columns with the Shelby Report, which I gave up this last year because I still write for Abasto, a Hispanic grocery magazine. Yep. But I'm
You're such an underachiever, Cindy.
Yeah, I guess. So I'm getting to do what I really want to do. So,
well, it sounds like anyone who would hire your group would certainly benefit, because you have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, and I can see the value in creating a group like yours. So,
thank you.
Yeah, very interesting.
We call it a group, but it's just the 2 of us. But the idea behind that is, if somebody needs innovation, if somebody needs analytics and stuff, we know so many people in the industry. We bring those people in to help. That's where the group aspect comes in. But anyway,
right.
Thank you for the time to share. Really the health story. I think is I want if one person listening to us right now, Michelle, says, "Oh, my vision has been a little strange," or I have been fighting this. If one person makes a doctor's appointment and learns something, it's just all been worth it. Keep in mind the acronym Be Fast, which we hear the FAST acronym for signs of stroke, but it's Be Fast. So B is your balance. Okay. And E is the vision, the eyesight piece of it. Neurologists say they can tell so much about a person through their balance and vision stuff. And then the FAST, the acronym that we always hear about stroke and aneurysm signs with, the face and the arm and the speech, and just making sure that you react very quickly is the T, the time and such. So add that balance and vision. So thank you for the platform to let me, get on my soapbox.
Oh, well, I thought, what better way to celebrate Heart Health Month on Valentine's Day to share your heart healthy story, your survivor. You were so blessed to be here with us, and I'm so blessed that you agreed to be my guest and share your story. And I hope that, like you said, if we can make a difference in just one person's life, or somebody who's listening, or maybe they have a friend or a family member or somebody who says they haven't been seen well, or having blurred vision. Maybe that will trigger that person to say, you know what, I just listened to something. Maybe you should see a doctor.
And you don't, and I'm proof to show that you don't always know. I had a stroke. I had a transischemic attack stroke. And I have no idea that I had it. So it's not always the big, crashing symbol and
right. Yeah. It's not always a big aha moment or aha sign. It's just subtle often. Well, Cindy, thank you again for being my guest on February 14th, Luvafoodie LinkedIn Live. Join me next week when I will have Erin Duffy, and she is a very inspiring, transforming type of person that I think a lot of people, and she's started her own kind of story, and she helps people share their story. So it's going to be interesting to hear her story too.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody, and follow Cindy, follow Luvafoodie LinkedIn Live every Monday at 4 o'clock Central Time, except we will have a show next week, but not the following week because I will be at the NGA show.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting you in person, and there are no coincidences, Michelle. And
I agree.
Yeah, and sign up for the Heart Walk, May 21st in Minneapolis, Target Field.
Yes, yes, everybody. All right, thank you, Cindy. I will soon. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.